The agent waved me to the booth. He didn't say much, but he looked me up and down, up and down. He checked back and forth between the passport photo and the face in front of him, which they totally do if you've ever seen that thing. Look and see, is this really you? And you're like, well, I was fatter then, I was pregnant, or that was 6 years ago. I don't look quite like that anymore, but it's still me, I promise. Different glasses, you know. I felt confident. My documentation was in order and my English was proficient. First time here? He asked. Yes, I said, first time. Hello, you guys. Welcome to my channel. I'm Jess Cannell. And if this is your first time with the channel, I just want to say welcome. And I hope that by the end of today's visit, that I've earned your subscription. For those of you who are regulars, welcome back to the channel. Today we are starting a new series, and actually today is my birthday. The day that this video releases will be my birthday. I'm actually filming this the day before, but my son brought me these beautiful flowers, and so I just am gonna have them in the screen just because it's a rare treat to have such pretty flowers, don't you think? And then he also brought me a coffee. So I will take the occasional sip, but most of them I edit out, so no worries on that. Today we are starting a new book, and it is Melania. I've already gotten some feedback about this, and I do want to say, if you are someone who disagrees politically with she or her husband, I don't think you need to necessarily avoid the channel or avoid the conversation. I hope to handle this. We've actually just gone through an entire book about the Kennedys, and we're currently going through a book about Ted Kennedy. And you don't have to be a Democrat or a Republican to listen to that series. You can listen to it and set your political opinions to the side and enjoy it. If you don't feel you can do that for this series, I understand and I wish you well. But I would appeal to you, perhaps give it a chance with this first episode. Maybe you'll learn some things that you didn't know about this fascinating woman, and maybe you'll find that my way of handling it isn't so political as perhaps you would perceive it had to be. I don't think it has to be that way. I have a political background. My degree was in political science. I've worked in political offices. But I really do try to handle these biographies and memoirs more from a perspective of just as a human, like as a fellow person who lives on this earth. There are things we can learn from her and from her story. Actually, yesterday, my husband took me to Dealey Plaza. We went to the JFK 6th floor museum, and he took me to bookshops, and I found this magazine among others. And I was just thinking about this actually as I was thinking about this video, and I thought this gives us a good look at what I hope to do with this book, which is not, let's take everything that every one of these women ever believed about everything and decide today in this series whether or not we agree with all of it. That's not how we look at these stories. We look at Jackie O, and her perspectives were her own, and yet we can observe her life and learn from it. Same from Michelle Obama, same from Eleanor Roosevelt, same from Laura Bush or Hillary or any of the other women who would be covered in a book like this, including Melania Trump. And so I actually had some guidelines that I was going to try to go through with you guys. I'll put them up on the screen here for just a second so that you can see the kinds of things that I was thinking about. But the truth is, we're all adults. You can't control what I'm going to say, but I also can't control what you type. I would say I prefer for the comment section to be a place where rigorous, true things can be said and we can all learn and be sharpened and grow. What I strongly dislike is anything that's personal or that equates supporting a political candidate or a political policy with being a hateful person that wants the downfall of others. I don't think those two things are necessarily equated. The most significant one to me is to try to be empathetic toward your political opposition. Another way of saying that is put the best possible take on the other person's position. In debate, we used to say, describe your opponent's position in a way that they would recognize and that they would affirm is the true case about what they actually believe and how they actually think. I think those kinds of guidelines are helpful for political conversation. And I think we as a nation need to work and lean in to try to learn or relearn how to have strong political disagreement, strong opinions. No one is saying, hold back your opinion. How do we have legitimate, real disagreements and yet not hate each other? That's my goal here. That's my goal for all political conversation that we would have on this channel. And like I said, actually, I don't intend to look at this book at all through a political lens, although it's going to deal with some events that happened politically. So that's my intent and that's my hope for this channel. I hope that helps make it clear what I'm trying to do with this book. What I find personally, you know, like I said, I was a political science major. And so what I find is that every 4 years, they get everybody all riled up about everything. And it's not that none of it matters. I mean, like I said, I watch it all. I love the debates. I sit down with my kids and my popcorn and we watch the debates. If there is primaries for Democrat or Republican, I'm tuned in, I'm paying attention. I enjoy all of it. I enjoy the process. But I don't think that we have to have vitriol and hatred toward one another. And I think we can learn from her story. One of the things that we're going to see in today's episode, which I'm about to start reading, but one of the things that we're going to see in her story is that she is an immigrant. Out of all of our first ladies, one of the things about Melania Trump is that she is actually from a diverse background. She speaks, I believe, multiple languages. She came to America as an adult immigrant, coming for work. She was a working woman. She grew up with a family background that had gone through war, turmoil in their country. Her family had worked hard to get to the place that they were in their society. And she was very well traveled by the time she got to be an 18-year-old young lady. And so we're going to hear about some of those things today. We're going to hear about the contrast between how she came to America and where she is today. So let's get into it. Melania, the memoir by Melania Trump. If you've never done a book with me, we do not just read the entire book. This is more like a book club format where I'll read portions of the book and then we'll talk about it and we'll get through, 1 or 2 chapters worth of commentary in an episode. So this is long form book chat style videos and I hope you'll join me for it. It's really fun to get to interact in the comments and talk together about interesting books. So let's get into it. Chapter 1, USA. Prepare for landing, pilot announced. I pressed the off button on my Walkman and gazed out the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of New York City in the distance. My heart pounded with excitement. I was 26 years old, and while I had traveled everywhere in Europe, I had never been on a journey quite like this. This was America, New York, a different world altogether. I had made the decision to test my skills in the American modeling market carefully, after weighing all of the professional and personal implications. She's going to tell us more about this, the personal and professional implications of this decision, but this is her focus and ambition when we meet Melania in her book. She was coming to America. It was the era of the Walkman. I lived through that. I don't know if you did, but even that reference just took me back to, for me, that was more like childhood and junior high, where we would pop a tape in and put earphones in or wear the headset and feel really cool listening to our tape deck. But did you have that? I know later there were like the skip-proof CD ones that didn't work very well. They skipped way too much for my taste. But this whole picture of just having a Walkman, being on an airplane, is a different era than the smartphone era where everybody's on their laptops. When you went on planes, you either had to bring a book or take a long nap or read some magazines or like this, listen to Walkman. And so that's what she was doing as she looks out to try to catch a glimpse of New York City. I had embraced such risks many times in the past, but this gamble felt more significant. I packed my apartment in Paris. I met with my agent in Milan, and I said goodbye to my family in Slovenia. Whenever there is a discussion of her life in Europe, I am going to do a little split screen where you can see the map of what's being discussed, because ironically, even though a lot of the world understands American geography, America does not tend to have the best relationship with world geography. And so I'll put those up just so we know where she's talking about, because Paris and Milan may be familiar to you, but some of the cities that we're going to encounter that were part of her childhood and her life were not at all familiar to me and perhaps are new to you as well. So I'll put maps up so that we know what she's talking about and where she's coming from. Are y'all enjoying these flowers as much as I am? I hope you are. They're rather pretty. I'll give a little new view. There's a new view. My life was now 2 suitcases and a carry-on containing only essentials: clothing, shoes, cosmetics, my passport, and my portfolio. The portfolio, a culmination of nearly a decade of dedicated modeling work across Italy, France, and Germany, was my most valued asset. One of the things we may all know about her, but I'll just point out, is that she was a model for some number of years. I actually don't know hardly anything about that part of her life, and I know we get at least 1 full chapter on her modeling years. And so we're going to learn more about that. Not today, probably the next episode. But that's a significant part of who she was when we meet her at 26 years old, coming to America. It says that when she was in Milan, she felt as though she was swimming against the tide, moving in the opposite direction of everyone around me. They were all returning home from European vacations, going back to their home countries within Europe. In Europe, where traveling between countries is commonplace, I was at home anywhere on the continent. Embracing a new challenge felt exhilarating and exciting, but the distance between America and Europe felt immense, and my family and I had found these goodbyes particularly difficult. I just wanted to share, our family has moved quite a lot, actually, for how relatively young we are, but we've not only moved here in this local area, we have actually lived in many places around the nation and around the world. And so her comment about the goodbyes really struck me, because we have lived through those, and for a parent and a child to say these kinds of goodbyes is very difficult. I remember a lot of choked back tears, free-flowing tears, sobbing, hugging, going back for one more hug. It's very challenging to leave someone and to know that you don't know the next time you're going to hug their neck, and they're a very important person to you, and they're a support to you, and yet you're leaving. And I just wanted to point out, even when you know you're doing what you're made to do, which is the perspective that we get from Melania, that she has made this decision, she's moving forward with a particular angle in her life that she is pursuing. Even when you know that, it's very difficult to say goodbye to the people you dearly love. And so you can just imagine, as she's clicking off that Walkman, the excitement she would have been feeling, but also the mutual sadness that she would have had at there being this distance now between she and her family that feels far different than just traveling to a nearby European country. For Americans, it would be similar to if you had gone to college in Missouri, but you're from Texas. Maybe you travel some to California, you try a job out there for a little while, but you know you can always come back. Maybe you do a little stint in Florida, that's fine. But then at some point you move overseas. You move to Hong Kong, or you move to Berlin, or you move to London. The distance would feel much more significant because it is more significant. It's more expensive to travel. It takes longer. You have to have visas. You got to do a whole song and dance just to see the people that you love. So it would be difficult. These goodbyes are hard. She said, my family and I had found these goodbyes particularly difficult. Still, I was grateful for their trust, which strengthened my decision. Good luck, they said, as we had hugged and held each other tightly. Be safe. Let us know when you arrive. She talks about a necklace where they had engraved the German words for I love you on it. And she said she literally carried their love with her onto this plane and into this moment. It's a very sweet expression. Tuesday afternoon, JFK Airport. The airport was crowded. After a long walk, I finally reached immigration and customs. There were two lines, one for U.S. citizens and one for visitors. I joined the visitors line, which moved significantly slower than the other one, as the guards meticulously examined every detail of each passenger's papers, holding up passports, tilting their heads to the left and to the right, flipping pages and deciphering stamps. I loved this description because if you've ever traveled to another country, you might know this feeling. For example, our family was privileged to be able to go to Egypt many years ago. And the people who are examining your papers, now, mind you, I went through with children, so that's a different experience. But they're looking at you, they're paying attention to your clothes, they're noticing things about you. They check how long you can stay, they make sure all your stamps are in order. And even when you know that they are, that can be a very stressful moment. When you know, okay, I've done everything, I've crossed every T, all of our passports are for sure in date, we have 6 months out, it's no problems at all. You still feel nervous as they are sitting there examining you like, are they gonna let us into this country? Like, I know we have our little vacation planned with all of our plans, but this man right here in this little booth with his hat staring at me with his head cocked to the side could shut down all of our plans for the next few weeks. So yeah, I could identify with this. And if you've ever traveled, you feel this. She says, the line was crawling. I waited patiently. There were 20 people ahead of me at first, then 10, 5, 2. Finally, it was my turn. The agent waved me to the booth. He didn't say much, but he looked me up and down, up and down. He checked back and forth between the passport photo and the face in front of him, which they totally do if you've ever seen that thing. Look and see, is this really you? And you're like, well, I was fatter then, I was pregnant, or that was 6 years ago. I don't look quite like that anymore, but it's still me, I promise. Different glasses, you know, lots of things that could be different, but they're just checking to make sure, is this really you? I felt confident. My documentation was in order and my English was proficient. First time here? He asked. Yes, I said, first time. He smiled at me, stamped my passport, and handed it back to me. I looked at the date, August 27th, 1996. We're given a photo, which I will share with you. This is the first photo that she wants us to see. It's the start of her whole series of photos, which I think is really interesting because if you think of Melania, you know, the first thing a lot of people think of is Donald and the First Lady, but then you could also think model, beauty photos, fashion photos, right? But this is the first photo that she's excited to share with us. It's that passport photo stamped with that date. This was a momentous time in her life. This was something that changed the course of her whole life. And so this is what she wanted to share with us, that at JFK Airport that day in 1996, she entered America for the very first time. Welcome to the United States, he said. Despite the fog of jet lag, I recognized the importance of this moment. My life had shifted directions, presenting new opportunities. I was ready to embrace the path ahead. What I wanted to ask you guys is, have you ever known someone who has done this? Who has interacted for a long period of time, let's say more than 6 months, or actually moved their entire life to another country and another culture and interacted in a completely different language? Because this is such a challenging thing for her to have taken on. I think we can just say, oh yeah, she was a fashion model, whatever. I'll give you guys a new view of the flowers. She was a fashion model. Whatever, yeah, big deal. But this actually is a crazy big deal. She, by that point, spoke multiple languages, had traveled many places, and yet this is her first time to come to America, and she's all of a sudden, even though she says she's proficient, all of a sudden interacting in an entirely different language. I think this would be exceedingly difficult. What do you think? I'm gonna move them over here now. I'm having fun with my flowers today. I like this little floppy one. She leaves the airport and she is instantly in the smog and the noise and the honking and the chaos of New York City. She feels it. She smells the fumes. There's a haze. She is in the city. I stood by the curb and concentrated on locating the driver sent by the agency. A long black limousine arrives and the driver lowers the window. Melania knows? Yes, hello. Are you from Metropolitan Models? I inquired. Yes, ma'am. He opened the door and I stepped into the back seat. She says, I felt a sense of relief to be away from the noisy chaos of the curb. Within a minute, we were on the road. I finally took a deep, calming breath. Traffic was heavy on the way into the city, so it took a while before the skyline came into view. When it did, my heart leapt. The Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, and the Twin Towers stood proudly against the horizon. Having only seen this iconic view in magazines and films, witnessing it in person was exhilarating. The scale and vibrancy of Manhattan were overwhelming, and with each passing moment, my excitement grew. I remember this feeling, and I wonder if you have a story like this. When I went to Little Rock, I got a job interning for Governor Mike Huckabee, and I visited the Capitol, I guess, for my interview, but once I knew I had the internship, it was such a different feeling to walk onto those skinny sidewalks going up from different angles to the Capitol building and to look at it and to just feel like, wow, this is an amazing, big, important building where I work. For me, that was this amazing moment of realization of something in my professional life that felt really exciting to me. Do you have something like that where you felt like, boy, this is huge? Like you're at this crossroads where so many things feel possible, and they are possible. You could go in any different direction. And you're at a time in your life when your commitments are low and the opportunities seem endless, and you have this glorious moment of, wow, everything is out in front of me. And I think that's what she was feeling. She says all second thoughts dissipated and she knew this is where I was meant to be. She says, reflecting back now, she is struck by her youthful confidence. She says, life's circumstances shape you in many ways, often entirely beyond your control. Your birth, parental influences, and the world in which you grow up. But as an adult, there comes a moment when you become solely responsible for the life you lead. You must take charge, embrace that responsibility, and become the architect of your own future. Coming to America, coming to New York City, that was my moment. Another pivotal moment came as I raised my right hand and recited the Pledge of Allegiance 10 years after my initial arrival in July 2006. And became an American citizen. It was not an easy process, and my personal experience dealing with the trials of the immigration process opened my eyes to the difficulties faced by all who wish to become U.S. citizens. I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had become a true citizen of the world, at home wherever I was, and now with gratitude in my heart and on paper, I was finally also an American. This first chapter takes us from Slovenia, saying goodbye to her family, but it takes us into that moment of her being in the airport, moving toward the goal that she has set before herself. And she says at the end, she was now a citizen of the world and truly, even on paper, an American citizen. We're going to get through chapter 2 and then we'll wrap up for today. This is called The Win. On the morning of Tuesday, November 8th, 2016, I woke up early. The city was quiet, calm. I love early, peaceful mornings. Peace I would especially need in the coming hours. She goes in and kisses Barron's forehead. I believe he was about 10 at this point, if I'm thinking right. Maybe not quite. About 10. Taking an extra moment to look at him, knowing his world had already undergone so much transformation since his father's decision to run for president, I realized this day would begin changes none of us could predict. I made a commitment then and there that if we were headed to the White House, I would fiercely protect my beautiful son in every way I could. I think it's really fascinating to consider this moment. And this is where I hope that even if you totally disagree with her husband, which is fine, plenty of people have strong disagreements on all sides of the political aisle, and that's perfectly fine for all of us to have. However, as individuals, I think any human can look at this situation and realize, wow, that would be momentous. To be on the cusp of a decision that's in the hands of an entire nation. And depending on what they decide, it's not only going to change your entire life, but it's going to impact your child's life and how their character is formed for the next potentially up to 8 years of their life, which with a 10-year-old would be his entire, adolescence moving toward adulthood. And so again, we set aside that political aspect of this, but we move into this kissing his head, a young son who's a preteen, on the cusp of so many things in life. But then on the cusp of this moment, Election Day in America, that could change, and we know will change, so many things about his life. One thing I also wanted to point out is that this right here is why in America, and I believe in many places around the world, I know that the royals do this with their children, we tend to guard and shield first families and their children from the glaring eye of publicity. Princess Catherine's perspective on this is that she is the photographer who has learned the skills of photography so that she can take the photos of her children and opt to release those photos at their whim and at their desire rather than entrusting that job to someone else. But I think back to when I was in junior high and I really strongly identified with Chelsea. We were about the same age. I think she's perhaps a couple of years younger or a couple of years older. I don't quite remember. But she had that awkwardness that middle school kids tend to have. And that was the age that I was. And so I really resonated with that. And for the most part, the American press left her alone. And you may recall from the things that her father did, great disagreements that characterized his presidency, that she was by and large guarded from that. She didn't receive criticism. There weren't an absurd number of photos taken of her. I really value that the American press still guards first families because, you think about Chelsea was the one that I first remember. We had the Bush twins and they entered their college years, I believe, while their dad was president. And then the Obama kids, they went through adolescence and I believe entered college during their father's years. And so it is a good thing that we guard first families so that they can be as much as possible like the kids that they really are. I do also want to point out that we did have an episode of going through the first kids. It was a Life magazine, I believe, that did like a follow-up on where are all of the children that lived in the White House during their father's presidencies. So I'll link to that in the description if you're interested in that, because that was an interesting little look at what some of their experiences were like and where they were at the time of the article. She says Donald had poured his heart and soul into building a movement that could bring about real change. Now it was up to the American people to decide if they would trust my husband to lead our country. For now, there was nothing left to do but wait and vote. This reminded me of this wasn't very long ago, we did a review of the RFK assassination printing of Life magazine. And that one took us all the way through the California primary day for RFK, where he was in this very same position of, I've done everything I can do, and now it's in the hands of the people, and they're either going to vote for me or they're not. And there's not much you can do on that final day. This is the day we're on for the Trumps. We're given a picture of supporters outside of their building, screaming on the streets, yelling out his name. Motorcades are going. We see the crowds lining the streets trying to catch a glimpse. And then she takes us into the voting booth with her. And as she's walking in, she hears both cheers and dissenters yelling. She says, inside the polling station, election workers greeted us. We entered the privacy of the voting booth. Standing beside my husband and seeing his name on the ballot, I felt a surge of pride and amazement. It was a moment filled with emotion and significance for me, representing yet another peak of our journey together so far. There's a few things I wanted to say about this. Number one is just as a wife, can you imagine how you would feel, how proud you would feel of your husband, that this is where his hard work had gotten you and your family. That out of all the people in a country as large and diverse as ours, that this act of getting to mark down the bubble next to his name, that's where things had gone. But also just having come on the heels of the chapter of her being an immigrant who became a citizen. What an amazing moment this would be, y'all. I just think this would be so fantastic. And I hope you can, whatever your politics are, I hope you can set them aside to kind of just marvel with me at what that moment would feel like. Handing over those pieces of papers, we completed a significant step in the American democratic process that I had grown up admiring from afar. A process I was now squarely in the middle of. A process that would soon thrill me and sometimes in the coming years confuse me, like it did millions of other Americans. By noon, we were back home at Trump Tower with little to do until the results began to trickle in later that evening. So we were in a phase of anticipation. I devoted that day to Barron and to my parents. I knew Donald was busy going to and from his campaign office, home again and back to the office. Each time we were together throughout the day, I was impressed by his calm. He was focused and relaxed. This man is remarkably confident under pressure. And the pressure test was just beginning. This is what she experienced, was that he was calm, he was focused, he'd go to the campaign office, come back. Each time they come back, he's relaxed. By 7 p.m., the major polls and pundits had all but crowned Hillary as the victor, and our family waited along with millions of others to see if they were right. Do you remember that night? I do, because I was part of the group that assumed that was what was going to happen. We all thought Hillary was going to win, and our family was watching. And I remember beforehand, before it started to turn, I remember the feeling of, it looks like it's going to be her. And we all thought that. By 10 p.m., however, the mood began to shift. It became clear that this election would not be as straightforward as had been initially reported by the media. The media, the pollsters, the pundits, they had all gotten it wrong. Donald was defying the odds, inching closer to victory, and then it was official. At 2:30 a.m., Wisconsin's results confirmed it. Donald had won the presidency. The room erupted in a mix of cheers, gasps, and hugs. The world as we knew it was about to change. And you know, that's true politically, that a whole lot was about to change, but it's particularly true as a wife. Just like we talked about before, when she went in to kiss Barron on the cheek, a whole lot about her life was about to change. There is shock. Donald expresses astonishment and excitement. He hugs her and says, "Can you believe it? Can you believe it?" And she responds, "Of course I can. I believed in his victory all along, knowing his unwavering dedication to making America great again." Despite the late hour, we made our way to the hotel for the victory speech, she says. We waited for Hillary Clinton to concede the election, and the call came. And within a few moments, Donald took the stage. Barron and I stood beside him, proud and ready for the next chapter. He gives a speech and he accepts the presidency. He becomes the president-elect. While the joy of our victory was overwhelming, my mind quickly shifted to the multitude of tasks before us. As I contemplated the weight of responsibility and the challenges that lay ahead, I also couldn't help but think about Barron and how this new stage in our lives would impact him. As I considered the many roles I now had to balance, mother, wife, first lady, daughter, sister, friend, I knew that careful planning and organization would be key in navigating this new journey. I finally closed my eyes at around 5 a.m. and opened them just 2 hours later. She says, to lead us into the next chapter, she says, in the half-light of the morning, my thoughts turned to my own journey as an American, born far away, like so many others. That's how chapter 2 ends. Next time we will be getting into her childhood, but first let's just wrap this up. I hope you can see already, my goal is not, there's a whole section where she shared the exact quote of Trump's speech that night. My goal is not to tell Donald Trump's story. My goal is to help us see through the eyes of Melania. What does she experience? What are her insights as an immigrant to our political system? So there may be discussion of political topics, but more through the eyes of what does she see as an immigrant, as a mother, as somebody who is a political spouse? What are her experiences and insights that are unique to her that you and I don't have? That's what's unique about this book to me. That's what's interesting about this book to me. And so I hope it's of interest to you too. I hope you'll continue to join me. Please let me know what stands out to you about these 2 chapters. What have you enjoyed hearing? Is there something you're looking forward to knowing about her life? And if you haven't yet, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more about Melania. On Wednesday, we're going to continue our discussion of Chappaquiddick, which is going through the story of Ted Kennedy and the car accident that ultimately ended Mary Jo Kopechne's life and ended his path to the U.S. presidency. On Fridays, we are going through the Radium Girls. That is a story set during World War I, where young ladies were painting with radium and unaware of the dangers it posed to their physical body. And so that's a fascinating story that we will start on Friday. I hope you have a great day. I'm about to have a great day. My birthday is tomorrow. I'll be 45, which is a big one. Very fun. We'll see you soon. Bye.